So Simon, okay, help me out on this. You live in the
I
Netherlands?
live in the Netherlands. Adrien lives in London.
You're mixing me up.
Yes.
Clear this up. It's all yours. It's all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk a little bit about storage this afternoon. We're here. The presentation is on behalf of Kingston. My name is Simon Besteman. I am from the Netherlands. I live in the Netherlands. I am the CEO of ISP Connect, which is the Dutch Trade Association of Cloud Providers. You know, you've all heard that data is the new gold. Data is the new gold. I was speaking recently to this guy from a company that I'd never heard of. You've never heard of it. I've actually already forgotten their name. It's a small company. They make optics for satellites. It's very specialized, very technical stuff. And his talk was a little bit too technical for me, and I was getting lost a little bit. And suddenly he said something that really caught my attention. He said that his devices produce 2 terabytes of data per second. Per second. That's more than the Dutch cloud industry does. And this is one company among thousands. The predictions of the evolution of data, the most forecasts say that it's about tenfold. Some predictions say data, the volume of data that we're going to be storing, that we're going to be processing, that we're going to be analyzing, that we're going to be pumping back and forth will increase 25-fold over the next decade. And well, you see it on the slide. We're talking about 163 zettabytes in a few years. And this is data that's going to be extremely relevant for us as an industry. And how we're going to deal with this data is going to determine whether, as a cloud industry, we still have a right to exist in 10 years or not. So I want to go a little bit about where does that staggering prediction come from? Actually, the main change that we are seeing is that over the past decade, the explosion of data has been driven by humans. And the main factor of the big growth in data has actually been the entertainment industry, the video industry. 10 years ago, if you remember, it was very difficult to watch a video on your mobile phone. It was very expensive to watch on your mobile phone. Nowadays, the Economist was writing about this recently. I think the lowest price for data is found at this moment in India, where on mobile data, 1 gigabyte of data costs 4 cents, something like that. So you can imagine there's more than 1 billion young Indians who are just watching videos all day. This is going to keep on growing. It's going to slow down a little bit, and maybe you've read the papers. You've seen that the EU has passed a new copyright law this week, and this, at least in Europe, this is certainly going to impact the volume of data that goes on in entertainment. But even without that, the big driver of data now is going to shift away from humans. It's going to be data that is generated by machines and destined not for humans, but generated for machines to interpret. It's going to be business-generated data. It's going to be data generated by apparatus, by heavy machinery. It's going to be data that's generated by cars. It's going to be data that's generated by self-learning devices. It's going to be data that's generated by healthcare devices, mostly. The Internet of Things is already the biggest driver. the interaction that we're having with connected devices. Well, you see this is quite staggering. By 2025, we're going to be interacting 4,800 times per day, basically one interaction every 18 seconds. This is not going to be, of course, conscious interactions. It's just going to be interactions already now. Interactions with our thermostats, interactions with our cars, interactions with our devices. This made me laugh the other day. I was reading that there was a Samsung oven that you can install in your home, but you can only use it. You can only actually cook a chicken in that oven if you first accept the user agreement of Samsung, and that user agreement is that your oven will send data to Samsung, whatever they want to do with it. And cars. Today, autonomous cars are experimental things. 40 terabytes a day per car. But we're seeing actually what we call autonomous cars. Already now, cars like Teslas are actually the semi-autonomous cars. And one Tesla is already writing data at a rhythm of 10 to 15 terabytes per day. And it's not an autonomous car. 10 to 15 times a day. This is data. This is data that's not going to be used real time, obviously. We cannot afford to start having autonomous cars that are dependent on a live network connection. Or you would get terrible accidents. This is data that's generated for analysis and then for reuse in the cars later. But remember, we're going towards a situation where in the coming decade, first probably a number of trucks are going to be entirely autonomous, and then the taxis, and then gradually, if you have children, let's say under the age of 10, there's a big chance that they will never need to learn to drive a car. They will simply go into self-driving cars. And then AI. AI cannot exist on its own. Any AI, any learning device is only as good as the data you put into it. Remember, a few months ago, Microsoft announced that they had this facial recognition system that actually was very good, turned out, at recognizing white faces and very bad at recognizing black and Asian people. And they had egg on their face a little bit, obviously. And then they said, yeah, we found out what went wrong. We fed it with a database that we had, and it was a database of white faces. And we didn't have enough people from other databases. You need, in order to get the maximum out of AI, you need to feed it magnitudes of data. And AI, self-learning devices, are growing up very fast. So we're talking here by a growth of a factor of 50 of the data that's going to be needed for AI. This is also quite staggering. And healthcare. Healthcare is is taking the first steps towards the digitalization. But the digitalization of healthcare is going to grow very fast. I saw last year at a conference this toilet with sensors. And if people use the toilet, the sensors give a real-time analysis of their urine and write that to the servers of their MD. And if at any point an albumin level, for instance, is exceeded, a trigger is set out, and which will make that the MD will make an appointment with their patient. This is the future. These are fantastic solutions. These are things that, this is just one example, but the digitalization of healthcare is going to make healthcare, it's going to make it possible to give people the kind of healthcare with a day-to-day care, a day-to-day monitoring that right now we're completely unable of doing it. These are actually very exciting developments, but they're going to eat data. In the Netherlands, one of the challenges that we're facing, and I'm sure it's not different in Germany, is to make sure that we get everywhere in the nation the fast connections that are needed for this data. Roll out the fiber optics, to the fiber to the home everywhere. And yeah, because we have to bear in mind that in the past there have been a lot of predictions about the growth of the internet, about the growth of computing. So far, every prediction we've had has always been way off the mark, and always been way off the mark by being too pessimistic. So what I just told you, I think try to double it in your mind, and then you will have an idea of what the kind of data we'll be having. And so the question is, what are we going to do with this data? And first of all, I think the first challenge for the cloud industry is, we are not going to be generating the data. And right now, you see that the people who are owning this data, who are generating this data, tend to keep it to themselves, even though it's not their core business to work with it. Car manufacturers generate data and they store this data themselves. And we're going to need to, as a cloud industry, we're going to need to be able to offer the guarantees of security, of confidentiality, of reliability that will convince people to stick to their core business and give their data to us. Because we are the ones who know how to deal with that data. And let's be honest, for us, these are golden times ahead if we can get our hands on this data. And we need to start thinking also of we need to get a very clear picture of how are people going to make their choices when it comes to their data. There's some studies about it, about what's going to drive the market here. And I was actually a bit surprised to find that security comes only number 3. Actually, the first thing that people want, and here I'm talking about the people managing the servers of those data, the first thing that everybody's looking at is performance. Number 2 comes price, and only number 3 comes security, and number 4, a very logical one, is scalability. Will you be able to grow? And it will happen. It will not happen on the servers that produce the data. It will happen in the cloud, because the processing will happen in the cloud. Adrien, I would like to ask you to come on stage. Adrien Viaud. Adrien Viaud is the technical guru of Kingston. And Adrien, I've extended a bit the challenges that are on our way, and everything is going to happen. And you have some answers, at least from Kingston's side, about how we can deal with them. So let me give you the floor.
Yeah. So that's very exciting stuff for us at Kingston, because as you can imagine, all that data, all that processing requires memory. So whether it's RAM, whether it's SSDs, it's very exciting opportunities for us. Do you know how long Kingston has been in the market for, or when it was created? Actually, 32 years ago. Just as a quick reminder, because a lot of people think of Kingston with flashcards, USBs, but we were there back, a lot of these companies were not even here when we started, so 32 years ago. And our core business was really related to DRAM. So we started working with, actually, I think one of the first customers we had over 30 years ago was Apple, I think, who came, because the two founders, John Tu and Davidson, they came up with the idea of having removable memory. At the time, I think all the DRAM was embedded and soldered on the motherboard. So they thought, oh, maybe we should have a removable option. And then it picked up, and then they started answering phone calls from Apple and other guys. So that's how it all started 32 years ago. And then eventually we had to kind of diversify the business, and we got into NAND solutions. which includes USBs, flash cards, and of course SSDs. Then we got into gaming. I'm sure some of you are probably gamers here. So we now do, we started with a DRAM for gamers, then we did headsets and mice. Then we have embedded solutions. So a lot of the things that Simon talked about, the IoT, your thermostat, your phones, your Alexa at home, all these things have embedded memory, which talks directly to the cloud. So we're also involved in that. So yeah, basically the message is very clear. We are in a lot more places than you think. Even a lot of the RAM that some of these vendors sell, I'm not really allowed to divulge this information, but underneath the sticker that says whoever, then it's often Kingston underneath, yeah. One very important thing for Kingston is that we want the products to work. So, if you go to the Far East and you can buy very, very cheap components, the DRAM or the flash chips to make an SSD, it's very easy to buy very cheap stuff over there, but to make it work is another story. So a big part of what we do is to make sure the products work. So we spend a lot of money and a lot of engineering resources to make sure our products are compatible. And this is why a lot of people come to Kingston to ask for our expertise to develop their solutions and build solutions for them. So that's where the advanced validation lab comes from, where we do testing, and we got people outside, big names outside coming to these to us to ask to do testing for them. And the last thing is where we basically produce a lot of products for some big names. And we actually, talking about data centers, we work with all the big names out there. So yeah, some very exciting opportunities coming. So as I said, we produce a lot of DRAM products, but also, and this is why really we're here today, is to promote our new enterprise SSD, the DC500 series. I'm not going to go into too much technical details because you can come to the booth so we can have a technical discussion. But basically, we're very excited with that product. That's an SSD that we work very closely with the NAND manufacturers, flash chip manufacturer, and the controller manufacturer to make sure we have an SSD that delivers really sustainable performance. It's critical for a data center SSD to have sustainable performance. You cannot have performance like this, If a lot of people, let's say all your Tesla cars start sending data to the server, and suddenly you have fluctuation in performance, it may mess up, the gathering of the data. So quality of service, consistent I/O delivery is critical, and also to have, very, very low latencies. So this is talking about our DC500, but I think the main message really is, if you have any questions for Simon or for Kingston, please do come to our booth. We'll at E04. We may have time for one question or two questions, if any of you have here. Otherwise, Simon will be at our booth for another half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour. Feel free to come see us, and we can have a chat. Any questions? No?
If there's no questions, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you.